schools, that we have no oversight on the tax dollars that we give them, we have no oversight on how that money is spent, and we have no accountability to the people who are spending that money. Or they have no accountability to us, I should say. So we're wasting money on things like the voucher program. We're wasting money on things like educational savings accounts that they want to enact. And what we really need to be doing is focusing on making sure that every public school in Wisconsin has the money to meet the needs of the students that go to that school. If you want to send your kid to a private school, great. Go ahead and do that. But like we said, 75% of students who got a voucher were already going to private schools, so there wasn't a great burden or a great need for students who wanted to go to private schools to get into those private schools. So, can we afford the voucher program? No.
Thank you. Mariana Stout, District 56.
Well, I don't think I need to reiterate how I feel about the money that's being spent on private schools. I think there is room for improvement in the public schools. I have a little story to tell. When I was working in Texas, Mission High School, bordering Mexico, we had one of the, 1995 by the way, we had one of the highest dropout rates in the nation. A local congressman decided to call Washington, D.C. and spoke to Education Secretary at the time, Riley, and our president at the time, President Clinton. They paid a visit to our school and they determined what barriers there were to completion, high school completion, and one of those being the language barrier, the other being poverty. They took a look at ways that they could help those that are forced to have to contribute to the household income, and they completely redesigned the school to meet those needs. They knew that these students were not going to go to four-year colleges. They knew that these students needed to leave high school and have a skill and move into the workforce and help their families as they were doing in high school. So I'm not saying that private schools are necessarily bad. Like I said, I taught at a private school. I'm all for people that are in favor of that, as long as they pay their own way, as they did in the school I taught at. And I'd like to see more of those dollars currently being put into private vouchers back into the schools, and maybe taking up some of the programs that they took up in Texas, where I used to work.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy.
I just wanted to take a moment to correct something that Mr. Baker said. And he had said that 71 counties in Wisconsin had referendums on schools. That's 71 school districts out of 424. So, I just wanted to put that in perspective. But I also want to tell a little story. And this particular story happened to be in our local newspaper, the Appleton Post-Crestline, a couple years ago. And it was a story about a young Hispanic boy that was going to a voucher school, and he had become very successful at this voucher school. But the interesting thing was, he didn't get a voucher. And I thought, well, that's interesting. But he still gave credit to the voucher program, because what he said was, if it wasn't for the voucher students in that school, I wouldn't have gotten the scholarship that allowed me to go to that school. So, there's a couple things that I think are a problem. I noticed Superintendent Lee Ellinger in the audience. We have a lot of unfunded mandates that we put on schools. Some of them come from the state, many come from the federal government. And I think we ask our schools to do a lot of things that maybe we shouldn't. And, or if we are going to ask them to do it, we got to make sure we fund it.
Thank you. Mr. Powers?
I believe the figure was $600 to $800 million in the next 10 years. That's nothing, because in 10 years the cap comes off the voucher system. How do we support two complete school systems in this state? We can't. But there are things that we can do. For instance, there is a budget out there. Senator Vinehout, State Senator Vinehout, is talking about a budget that fully funds schools, fully funds transportation, gives us a surplus, and does it by taking back the money that's given away in tax credits, the hundreds of billions that are given away in tax credits, and it's accomplished absolutely nothing. Don't even need to go that far to look at this. The voucher schools were an attempt to improve achievement. They failed. They're not doing it. Why are we even talking about increasing this? Why would we even talk about taking the cap off in 10 years? We need to quit budgeting 2 years every 2 years. let's come up with a 10-year plan for Wisconsin. It includes schools and healthcare and jobs and roads. And let the people look at that plan and judge their legislatures against it. We can do this, but we can't do it with voucher schools.
Thank you. District 5, Mr. Steineke?
Thank you. Well, first of all, according to the Nonpartisan Legislative Fiscal Bureau, if we ended the voucher program tomorrow, every school in this area would receive less money, not more. So it's just a fact according to the Fiscal Bureau. Second of all, I just want to, I'm getting this perception, and I with all due respect to Sharon, I don't believe our education system is in decline. I don't believe we are failing our kids in this state. I believe in the educators, I believe in the schools in the valley and throughout Wisconsin that we're actually putting forward a good product. We're 5th best in the country in our education system. So I'd rather not continually downgrade what our schools are already accomplishing. Granted, it's with less, sometimes less resources, even though in the last budget, we put forward an additional $417 million in education funding over the prior year's budget. So it's not like we're not investing. And if you look at the graph shows you that we are closing that gap. We went through the recession. Governor Doyle even said back in 2009, if he had not had an influx of federal money through the Stimulus Act, the cuts he would have had to make to public schools would have resulted in 1 out of every 9 teachers losing their jobs. You can look it up. 2 years later, when we first came in, we were in the same exact spot, but we had no federal stimulus money. So yes, we had to make choices. We had to give school districts some flexibility. I'm proud of the work that Kakana schools have done. They took a school district that was on the brink of
Thank
bankruptcy,
you.
and now they're doing extremely well.
So first off, can we afford it? No, we can't. We've seen that throughout all the other districts. A lot of bigger districts took a lot of big hits. We can't afford it. It's going to put a lot of pressure on our public schools. We need to find a different way of doing it. There's a few things that I did want to kind of talk about real quick, and that is when we were discussing earlier about how the budget is full of people. If you would assume it as a pie, right? And everyone wants a piece of the pie. And my opponent says, well, you know, there's only so much we can give out. The issue I have with that is when the federal government offered more pie, we turned them down. We literally said, no, we don't want it, we're not taking that flavor today. And it was because of politics. We know it's because of politics. There's no reason why you should be turning down money that is given you that is passed through. Next, when you talk about how, well, we're doing fine, you know, I think that we're really striving in education. Teachers, and we know this, are going to be a lot harder to come by in the next couple of years. Teachers don't want to teach here. They don't want to be here. Families don't want to live here. Students, when they get out of school, don't want to practice here. They don't want to be here. We need to make sure that we step up as leaders and turn that train around. And it's a hard process, I get it, but it's something that we got to do. And when you talk about how they pass on a lot of mandates, and some of them are unfunded, and that's not right to do, then why do you keep asking? Why do you keep passing them? Or why do you keep telling us to go find the money?
Okay, we're going to start this next round with Mr. Kelly, District 5, and Mr. Steineke, then to Mr. Powers, then to Sharon, then to District 56 with Mr. Murphy and Mariana Stout, then District 55, Mr. Baker, and Mr. Rohrcast. Kind of segued into this for us. There's a growing shortage of teachers applying for jobs in Wisconsin. Why do you think this is? How can we address this without lowering teacher licensure requirements? Mr. Kelly.
So this is a big issue. We all know it. I think everyone in here knows that it's an issue. Being on a school board, I see people hired and resignations all the time. And I know that it's a lot harder to get them in the door than it is for them to leave, right? We've seen almost teachers become hired guns where they're allowed to go to any district they wish, and that's in some cases a decent thing, but in a lot of cases it makes it really difficult. And the number one thing that you see a lot of teachers do is say Wisconsin is not for me. It's just not. I can go to any other state and I can go there and teach, and it's a lot more friendly to me to do so. You know, right now we're seeing the destruction of unions. And there's a lot of big issues that are on top of them as teachers. And a lot of them get bogged down in everyday things. And it's the fact that we keep claiming we need more accountability, and then they say this is too much, and then we look at them and we say, but we trust you as a professional. We trust you know what you're doing, so don't worry. We know that there's a ton of issues. Teachers don't want to teach here, and I don't blame them. I don't. You know, they need to feel as though they are welcomed here, and I just don't think they have that feeling.
Mr. Steinke?
Well, let's start off by examining the premise. Yes, there are teacher shortages. There are a lack of people going into education as a career in Wisconsin. It's also a national problem. It's not a Wisconsin problem. This is a national problem. So I know people would like to make it about Act 10 and some of the other things, but it's not about that. It's about the fact that there's a lack of people nationwide going into education. So obviously that's something we're going to need to address, but it's not a Wisconsin-specific problem. It is a national problem.
Mr. Powers?
I learned a long time ago how to deal with no respect, and that was when I came back from Vietnam, and then like a dummy, I went into teaching and found the same problem there. A couple of years ago, Act 10 came into Wisconsin, and since that time, well, first of all, you take Act 10, and what it did was it blamed Wisconsin teachers for all the state rules. They're the problem. We've got to punish them. A couple of days ago, I went in and talked to some of the teachers. One of them was a former student of mine, been in teaching, I think, 2 years, talking about her sister who makes a lot of money in the medical career and thinking about leaving. And talk to anybody connected with school districts, the problem with teachers coming in and then leaving because they get a better offer somewhere else. We probably won't have a teacher shortage in the larger school districts, but we sure will in the smaller school districts. Tigerton, just a few miles from me, has about 250 students. How many teachers do you think they hang on to when someone else down the road, just a few miles, offers them a couple thousand more a year? You know, it's a serious problem. I'm not sure how we address it. It has to do with money. It also has to do with respect. If you look at many European countries, the difference in respect that the teaching field has there just doesn't happen here. Almost everybody says, my kids' teachers are the best. But then it goes beyond that. Oh yeah, teachers in general, they're a problem. They make too much money and have too many days.
Thank you. Sharon?
What was the question again?
How do we address teachers?
There's a growing shortage of teachers applying for jobs in Wisconsin. Why do you think this is, and how can you address this without lowering teacher licensure requirements?
So this is pretty hot topic. The two teachers that I met on my campaign, they're from Milwaukee. They both graduated from Madison back in the 90s. And they moved up from Milwaukee here I think in the last 2 to 3 years. One is at Kimberly and one is at Neenah. And we sat down and I had a 2-hour discussion with them and asked them, what could we do to change it? And I believe the root is the money, but it's also, as John said, the respect. They've been victimized in this country, in our state. They've been basically taken, stripped away their retirement, their benefits, and the respect of the kids in the schools. They say that they come into school and the kids don't have respect for them anymore because their parents don't have respect for the teachers, because that's the media, that's the messaging that we've all been hearing and listening to over the last few years. So I think when we talk about education as the foundation to our community, having a successful community, we need to really step up to the plate and get the best teachers and give them the money they deserve, give them the respect they deserve. These two teachers, I don't know that they're going to stay here much longer. All of their friends that they went to school with in Madison, they've all left the state.
Thank you. Mr. Murphy?
Thank you. The teacher shortage is national. As a matter of fact, there are many states that have a much bigger problem than we have. But I would like to agree with Mr. Powers that, there is an issue with respect for our professional teachers. And I'm going to take this opportunity to call out people in conservative talk radio, because this disrespect did not come from Republican office holders. It came from the media and from, literally the loudmouths sometimes on conservative talk radio. And I was listening to that one day, and I heard one of the announcers come up, start talking about the lazy teachers. And it made my blood boil. That is not right. That is not the kind of debate that we should be having here in the state of Wisconsin when it comes to education. And I'm here today to say that that is dead wrong, and we should never go to that place when we start talking about education, because our teachers do a good job, and I believe that we need to support them in every way that we can.
Mariana Stout?
Well, I can tell you from a personal perspective that teachers do not go into teaching to get rich. Okay, they do it for the love of the job. They do it because they love children. They feel rewarded when they see a child's eyes open to new worlds, new horizons. I can also tell you that I think a lot of it has to do, as a state employee, I am currently on a leave of absence, but as a state employee who is impacted by Act 10, it's harder to take something away from someone that they once had than if you never had anything, you're not going to miss it. But once you've been given a certain amount as far as benefits or as far as wages, and it's taken away, it's a little hard to take. And I also think that teachers are having to take on a much larger role as far as dealing with the outcomes of societal failures in children. I'm not blaming the parents. I think parents have a very difficult role, especially in this economy, and having to work so many hours and having to take on 2 jobs and not being there for their children. Teachers are having to take on a much bigger role. And I respect them a great deal for that, but I can also understand why it might turn some people away from teaching.
Mr. Baker?
So I think everybody's pretty well hit the problem right in the head. Is we don't care about our teachers. We don't treat them with the respect that they deserve. We don't give them the kind of income they need to survive. The teacher shortage is real, and it is everywhere. But if these guys have been in office for the past 2 years, and we know what the teacher shortage is, and we know we're not respecting them enough, and we know that we need to do things to attract better teachers, then if we all know it, then why haven't we done anything yet? Why haven't we raised their benefits? Why haven't we raised their incomes? Why haven't we gotten into the public schools and said, what do you need? How do we support you in the way that you need to be supported to do your job to the fullest extent? The people who get let down the most in this transaction are not the teachers who, yeah, it's awful that they lost their benefits and it's hard for them to make ends meet, but it's the kids. The kids in the schools who are not supporting the teachers, who are helping us raise our kids, helping us build up, the future generations. We're not supporting them, we're letting our kids down. So if everybody knows what the problem is, and if everybody's known what the problem has been all along, how come we haven't fixed it yet?
And we'll let Mr. Rourke have the final word.
And I'll actually give you at least 3 suggestions on some concrete things about what we can do, and they really build off some existing programs. First is we have some great examples of how we are getting kids in the high schools interested in manufacturing and healthcare. Manufacturing, Appleton West has the ATEC school. Little Chute has the Career Choices Academy, which promotes healthcare fields. So that's a long-term solution. But why don't we do the same kind of a program then to focus on getting kids interested in education, particularly where the biggest shortages are, which is math and science. The second thing that we can possibly do is to provide more either matching scholarships or scholarships to kids coming out of Wisconsin high schools to go into UWO, into their education program. So we could look at increasing some funding for that, particularly if they're going to go for STEM type degrees to teach in those areas. Again, those are the big shortages, and as has been said, it's not just Wisconsin, it's national. And then the third thing, and this is taking a playbook out of the business world, there's a shortage of workers, and we're trying, businesses in the Fox cities have been trying to get college graduates from our surrounding states to move to Wisconsin for engineering and IT positions. Let's take, and that's through grant programs from the state. Why don't we establish grant programs that we could then go and recruit in these other states and bring some graduating kids in? And in terms of the last thing, the respect, I have utmost respect for Appleton West and the Renaissance School. That school saved the life of my child. So,
Thank
just
you.
to say that we don't respect it, I find, well, enough said.
Okay. I was just, in closing comments, want to say I really want to thank you. This is very stimulating, interesting, fascinating, back and forth of information that voters need to have. I know they can all find you at websites, and I'm sorry I could not get through any more questions and give additional opportunities for questions. However, you will all get electronic copies of all these questions that are really good that I'm just sorry I was not able to get to. So thank you. You should be getting this in the next day or two electronically. As soon as I have any individual district done, I'm going to be posting those voter guides on the various websites. So thank you. Thanks to the members of the league. Also, I want to thank the Appleton Area School District for the use of the facilities and the taping, which will all